video on setting up a Microsoft Access contacts database. So first thing I want to do, go ahead and launch Microsoft Access 2007 I've got here, which has a pretty good contacts database template built in. So go to local templates first. These are the ones that you can download. So local templates, and here it is, contacts. Click on that. It's going to give it a name of contacts.accdb, that's fine. Click on create, and that's all there is to it. So you've got yourself a contacts database here. You can obviously type in here first name, last name, email address and so on, or you can click on this new and it will bring you up the contact details form, and we can plug in names and addresses here. I'm Steve, so here we go, Steve Manser, my company, and you don't need to click save here, save and new. You can just close it, because obviously with Access, as it comes out of the box, everything you do is saved straight away back to the database. You're looking at the real data here. In the future, we're going to put a save button, which will give you a prompt to say, do you want to save the changes? A bit like Word and Excel and PowerPoint already do, but strangely Access doesn't do that. Anyway, here we go. Here's the contact I just created in my list, and again, you can click on the ID there and bring up the information. Access 2007 came out with a new field type called attachments. So what you can do in this contacts database is attach a photograph or an image to a contact, and it doesn't store it as a BMP, a bitmap, anymore. Whereas in previous versions, a bitmap would take up a lot of space. It would convert any images to bitmap, and it would take up a lot of space in your database. So we tried not to use it. But since 2007, this attachment field type will now store documents, images and so on in their kind of native format at a much reduced size. So that's quite a nice feature. Okay, I'll see you for the next part. Hello, and welcome to this second part of the demonstration. So what we've done is we've created this contacts database, and we've added a record, and what we're going to do now is, one of the first things you're going to want to do is convert the macros that have been created to kind of drive this database. You want to convert them to Visual Basic. So what you want to do is open up the panel there. Then what I tend to do here is choose Objects and make sure you're showing all Access objects here. So then we've got our table, contacts, a query, and we've got our two forms, contact details and contact list. If I go into the design mode of the contact list, you can see here that there's this ID field here. Now have a look at the event, the on-click event for this ID field. It's an embedded macro. I'll show you the macro. Here it is. So you've got certain conditions here, you've got actions that run, and you've got these arguments. And macros are great if you're new to Access, just learning it, or even if you're an intermediate user and you've got really good at macros, you can create all these things. But as the database gets a bit more complicated, if you want to add features to it, for power and versatility, you're going to want to convert the forms macros to Visual Basic. So I'm going to click on this option here. It's under Database Tools. Add error handling, include comments. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and convert, and that's done. So now if we have a look at this ID field, and the properties associated. The embedded macro is gone, and it's been replaced with event procedure. So if I can have a look at that, here we go. This is the Visual Basic that is behind that click event. So ID click, it's a subroutine, a private subroutine, i.e. just available for this form. And we've got some error checking going on here. If there's an error, just carry on. We're saving a record, and so basically this has all come from that embedded macro, and it's all been converted now to Visual Basic. It's also a great way for novices to learn Visual Basic by generating macros in the normal way that you would have learnt it, converting them to Visual Basic, and seeing exactly what it's done here. So there we go. We now have Visual Basic. By the way, if you hit Control G at any point and then Control R, you will be able to see any Visual Basic code that's associated with that form. So that's quite a nice handy shortcut for you. Okay, see you in the next video. Hello, and welcome to the third part. So I went ahead and converted the Access macros, embedded macros, to Visual Basic script on the other form, the contact details form, which I will show you. There were quite a few scripts in here, quite a few routines, an onload routine and various other things. So that's all done. What we're going to do now is we're going to split the Access database into a front and back end so that we can get it ready for network use. So what you do is you take your Access database, which is one entire file at the moment, go into Database Tools, and split the database. Now it isn't obvious where it is, but it's actually here under this Move Data portion of the ribbon, Access Database, and then it launches the splitter. I suppose it would have been nice to have the word splitter on the ribbon there, but anyway, just choose to split the database. It's going to ask you where you want to put your back-end file, because of course it's going to be splitting the database into two files. I'm happy to leave it on the desktop, which is where my front end is. So, oh, actually no, it's beg your pardon. It's actually in Steve Documents. My documents. So split, and the database was successfully split. So now, if I go to Steve Documents, My Documents, we should see that we have the contacts database here and the contacts BE, back end, here. I'll show you the back end. Really, it's just that table which contains the contact information. That's all it is. So if we now launch the contacts database, still seems to work as it did before. There's Steve, there's my record, it all looks the same, it all performs the same. The difference being there's a tiny little arrow just on this tables icon to show that this database table is now linked to a back-end table, which you can still open it, but you can't make any changes to this, of course. If you want to make any changes to the table, which is now on the back end, then you'll have to open up that back end. So this is something you should do when you are sure that you've got all the tables laid out, created in your database the way you want them. If you add a table to the back end later on, which we're going to be doing, you'll have to establish the link in the front end manually, but that's fine. Any changes to the fields that you make in the back end, that's fine. Any new fields, any changes to fields, they'll all just come through automatically. Okay, see you in the next part. Okay, so now what we're going to do is create a login form with a username and a password that will serve to do two things. One, allow people access to the database if they know the password. But secondly, it would also be useful to allow later on us, the administrator, to track what a particular user has been doing on the database. So for that reason, we normally do create a login form. So here's a table I've created earlier. There's an ID field, auto number, and a primary key. There's a field called username, and it's a text field, and there's a field called password, txt password, another text field. And on that password field, I've created an input mask called password. Actually, it's built in to Access, and it just puts asterisks over the password entries in there so that the administrator can't see what users' passwords are, or any user that happened to get access to it. So let's go ahead and save that and close it. Let's go into our database, and what we're going to do here now is we are going to import Access database. We're going to link to our back end, and we are going to choose that logins table that we created. Because we've already split it, but we needed to add a logins table, then we do need to go into that import facility to establish that link. That's why it's always quite a good idea, if you're still in the early stages of designing a database, is to not split it until you're sure you've created all the tables and done all the relationships and everything that you need. Okay, so now we have our logins table here. I'm going to create a user here called Steve and a password. All we need now then is to create a login form. So see you in the next part. Okay, so we created our logins table here, and what I've done is created a form called form login, which is very simple. It's just a couple of boxes here, two fields, username and password, txt username, txt password. I've set the password box to show asterisks. Did that earlier in the table, so that will work. There's an OK